Uh-huh.
and some dehydrating.
Uh-huh.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it really does a beautiful job. That's all I ever use at home anymore.
It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside of you, there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to all of us when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love, a heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. And at this time, we'll have an opportunity to light our candles of community. You can light a candle for a joy or a concern, or simply to bring more light into our space together. Let us stand in body or spirit for the lighting of the chalice and our spoken affirmation. Blessed is the fire that burns deep in the soul. It is the flame of the human spirit touched into being by the mystery of life. It is the fire of reason, the fire of compassion, the fire of community, the fire of justice, the fire of faith. It is the fire of love burning deep in the human heart, the divine glow in every life. Let us join in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in freedom, and to help one another. You may be seated. And now Dan is going to lead us in a song that has one of the most interesting titles I think I've ever seen.
But first, I have a reflection on our history. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dan Altoff. You haven't seen me here for a while, but I have been a member of this congregation since 2001. In 2003 and 2004, I was serving as the second president of the board when this small church here in Denison, Texas, received national attention over the issue of separation of church and state. When we incorporated under the laws of the state of Texas in October 2000, we became a not-for-profitable charitable entity, and we remain a 501c3 corporation. Donations to this body are tax deductible for U.S. income tax purposes. That was never a problem. But as part of doing things by the book, definitely by the book, we also requested to be exempted from the Texas franchise fee, which basically meant we would be able to sell things, T-shirts, coffee mugs, things like that, without having to pay a sales tax. Very small dollars, and I don't know that we've ever actually we've had some, I think we've had, rummage sales and things like that, but it was small dollars amount. But that decision as to whether or not we would be exempt from this Texas franchise fee was in the hands of the Texas State Comptroller. And they dragged their feet about giving an answer one way or the other for over 2 years before finally saying no. The reason? It was because Unitarian Universalism does not require a belief in a God, gods, or higher power, and therefore did not meet the comptroller's definition, the definition that the office of the comptroller developed, did not meet their definition of a religion. While this bureaucratic wrangling was going on in the background, from primarily correspondence, emails, and snail mail, while all of this was going on, I received a phone call one day in my office at Southeastern Oklahoma State University from a reporter at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram newspaper who wanted to ask me about this situation. To this day, I have no idea how the reporter learned about this situation and sought me out for an interview. I don't know. And no one has even hinted.
I can tell you exactly.
Oh, please.
Marjorie Montgomery, she boasts.
That's very interesting. Amy says that Marjorie Montgomery, a minister she was in Fort Worth, correct? Yeah, let them know. I had never heard until this moment, Amy, who had clued the reporter in on that situation. Thank you for sharing that. So the appearance of that article in the Fort Worth Star-Telegram set off a wave of outrage and indignity and also of support from across the nation. When that article hit the news stream, it was carried widely, including the Dallas Morning News and AP and other press services. We got a wave of support, including from Texas Baptists, and a request from the the Baptist Standard, which I believe is a newsletter for Baptists. And due to the pressure that was building from so many articles, editorials, and freely offered legal services, the comptroller, who had vowed to take her interpretation, her ruling, to the U.S. Supreme Court, all the way. She backed down. If you are interested in reading about this incident, you can simply, we're still out there, you can simply Google Red River Unitarian Universalist Church, and if you do a little digging, you can find the articles, the editorials that came out, and even if you go to Wikipedia and you look up the term Unitarian Universalism, and when the article appears, they have subheadings. One of the subheadings is called controversies, and we are mentioned specifically by as part of the controversy or a recent controversy. Again, recent, I don't know, that was in 2004. That's a full 18 years ago, but it definitely caught a lot of people's attention. It was quite a little ride. It was quite a little ride we had, and thanks to the many supporters, both known and unknown, Unitarian Universalism scored an important victory for separation of church and state in Texas, all because of a small UU congregation in Denison, Texas, who just wanted the same thing as any other religious congregation. So the exemption was granted in May of 2004. It'd be a fun little exercise to see the controversy and the reports of the controversy that spilled out in 2004. So thank you very much.
Now, after hearing that, I'm convinced that you do need to write a spoken word song about this controversy. I think that'd be really, would be really good. That's very interesting to hear, and it's probably good that it didn't go to the Supreme Court for the comptroller. I don't think that was a very good case. Our opening thought this morning comes from Nikos Kazantzakis on true teachers. True teachers are those who use themselves as bridges over which they invite their students to cross. Then, having facilitated their crossing, joyfully collapse, encouraging them to create their own.
Sing out praises for the journey, pilgrims we who carry on, searchers in the soul's deep yearnings, like our forebears in their time. We seek out the Spirit's wholeness in the endless human quest. Look inside your souls, the kindling of the hearth fire pilgrims new. Find the Spirit always restless, find it in each mind and heart. Touch and hold that ancient yearning, kindling for a newfound truth. Stand we now upon the threshold, facing futures yet unknown. Hearth behind us, wayside hostel, built by those who knew wild roads. guard we ere the sacred embers carried in our minds and hearts.
Our next reading comes from Carl Sagan and his work, Cosmos. Books permit us to voyage through time, to tap the wisdom of our ancestors. The library connects us with the insight and knowledge painfully extracted from nature, of the greatest minds that ever were, with the best teachers, drawn from the entire planet and from all our history, to instruct us without tiring and to inspire us to make our own contribution to the collective knowledge of the human species. I think that the health of our civilization, the depth of our awareness about the underpinnings of our culture and our concern for the future can all be tested by how well we support our libraries. Let us join together now in a time of meditation. I'll be using a meditation poem on breathing from Thich Nhat Hanh. The fourth element of our body is air. The best way to experience the air element is the practice of mindful breathing. Breathing in, I know that I am breathing in. Breathing out, I know I am breathing out. After saying these sentences, we can abbreviate them by saying in as we breathe in, out as we breathe out. We don't try to control our breathing, whether our in-breath is long or short, deep or shallow. We just breathe naturally and shine the light of mindfulness on it. When we do this, we notice that, in fact, our breathing does become slower and deeper naturally. Breathing in, my in-breath has become deep. Breathing out, my out-breath has become slow. Now we can practice deep, slow. Deep, slow. Deep, slow. We don't have to make an extra effort. It just becomes deeper and slower by itself, and we recognize that. Later on, you will notice that you have become calmer and more at ease. Breathing in, I feel calm. Breathing out, I feel at ease. I'm not struggling anymore. Calm, ease. Calm, ease. And then breathing in, I smile. Breathing out, I release all my worries and anxieties. smiles, release. Smiles, release. We are able to smile to ourselves and release all our worries. There are more than 300 muscles in our face, and when we know how to breathe in and smile, these muscles can relax. This is mouth yoga. We smile and are able to release all our feelings and emotions. The last practice is breathing in. I dwell deeply in the present moment. Breathing out, I know this is a wonderful moment. Present moment, wonderful moment. Present moment, wonderful moment. Nothing is more precious than being in the present moment, fully alive and aware. In, out. Deep, slow. Calm, ease. Smile, release. Present moment, wonderful moment. Our next reading is by Richard Shaw from Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Education either functions as an instrument which is used to facilitate integration of the younger generation into the logic of the present system and bring about conformity, or it becomes the practice of freedom, the means by which persons deal critically and creatively with reality and discover how to participate in the transformation of their world. And we're going to sing now number 128, For All That Is Our Life, 128. I've often thought that the vision of all educational institutions should be the cultivation of both human and ecological flourishing, and that their mission should be to educate humanity to make this vision a reality. Or perhaps, as Alfred North Whitehead put it, education should be about life. Everything that education should be about is connected to the life that we live, the world that we live in, and how it is that we can bring about greater human flourishing and ecological flourishing. Thus, the value of education is minuscule if it does not contribute in some way to maintaining a livable climate and halting the global loss of biodiversity. Because if education is about life, we first have to preserve life for education to have value. Human flourishing over the long run is simply not possible without ecological flourishing. When we begin to see education as a way to contribute more fully to the common good of all humanity and to the well-being of the entire earth, rather than simply as a way to get ahead, simply as a way to be successful, then we may have a chance to reverse our current descent into mass extinction and climate chaos. The cultivation of critical thinking, I think, is a key here. The cultivation of critical thinking is a key ingredient to any vibrant democracy. Anti-democratic propaganda thrives in a context where persons lack critical thinking skills. And critical thinking skills are lacking in countries that do not have strong public education systems. And here in the United States, a significant portion of our current political crisis is connected to our deficit in critical thinking. We have a critical thinking crisis. A vibrant democracy requires a strong public education system. The most robust democracies in the world have the best systems of public education. It is no accident that as public education has been systematically weakened in the United States, that our ranking in the Democracy Index has fallen precipitously, and that we are now considered a flawed democracy rather than a full democracy. Imagine if we could make a shift. If we could make a shift in our thinking and we started telling our children that we want them to have a good education so that they can help us, so that they can help us, so that they can help us create a more loving, a more just, a more sustainable world. That would be a vast improvement over our current focus on pursuing education as something to do simply to get a job and to be successful. Perhaps we could embrace together that the primary goal of education in the beloved community is service, not success. We seek education not to conquer the world as we climb the ladder of success, but to save the world as we give of ourselves in service. Such a vision of education for the common good might radically change the way we view education, and it might help us to prioritize access to and affordability of quality education for all people. The societal benefits of providing tuition-free college and tuition-free vocational education in the United States, I think would far outweigh the costs and allow persons to enter their careers and their service to society without a crushing load of student debt that harms them and their families and perpetuates inequality of opportunity and also wealth inequality. If we understood that education for all persons is a societal good rather than only a good for individuals, then we would bear the burden of the cost of education together as a society, rather than placing the brunt of that burden on the individual persons who are being educated. Perhaps if we saw education as being for the common good, we could more clearly see what it is that is hindering our society from truly flourishing. Perhaps we would recognize that the worsening of wealth inequality and the systems that perpetuate it are at the root of our real problems as a society, and that all of the culture wars are simply manufactured. They're a manufactured smokescreen to keep us from seeing and addressing our real problems. Perhaps a vision of education for the common good would help us to begin to see that the way that we fund and operate K through 12 public education, vocational and technical education, and higher education is exacerbating the problem of wealth inequality rather than reducing it. Education should be the most positive force for advancing equality of opportunity in a society. But we have made lack of access to and affordable access to quality education to be one of the greatest barriers to opportunity and a driving force of worsening wealth inequality in our nation. And this is even more greatly exacerbated by the fact that the schools in areas of greater poverty are poorly funded. And they're poorly funded owing to the use of property taxes to fund such a significant portion of our public education. Wealthy areas with higher property taxes get more funding for public education, thus perpetuating a vicious cycle that widens the wealth gap and also the opportunity gap between the rich and the poor. To make matters worse, our investments in public higher education have been gutted by tax cuts for the wealthy as we have moved away from what could be seen as a more progressive tax system to a system that is much more regressive in nature. Truly public higher education is almost non-existent in the United States today. About 11%, and it's always going down each year. It might have gone down since the last time I looked at it, but about 11% of the funding for our public colleges and universities comes from public funding. The rest is being covered by tuition and fees that have been increasing tremendously over the past couple of decades. Some of the funding comes from corporations and from individual donors, but most of the costs are being borne directly by the students and their families in these increased tuition and fees. The only persons who are able to come out of college or university debt-free are the wealthy or those who have significant scholarship support, while the majority take on a significant amount of debt that often takes them decades to repay. It is not an accident that the wealth gap in the United States was actually decreasing and the economy was actually lifting up so many persons out of poverty in the post-World War II period up until the late 1970s. This was not an accident because this was the period of time in which our nation invested heavily in the mental and physical infrastructure of our country. And we did this through a progressive tax system. Part of this investment included maintaining one of the best public education systems in the world at the time, publicly funding a much higher percentage of the cost of higher education as well than we do today, and paying for the education and the vocational training of millions of veterans through the GI Bill. Education was one of the keys to the economic prosperity of that time. It was a key to the time of booming growth of that time. But sadly, since the early 1980s, we have made a shift away from progressive taxation, and we embraced a trickle-down economic theory based on a warped individualistic view of humanity. A view of humanity that was much similar to the views of Ayn Rand and her objectivist philosophy at the time that so many politicians seemed to embrace. This view of humanity ended up enriching a small percentage of the population at the expense of the common good. And as a result, our system of education, that was once the envy of the world, was quickly reduced to mediocrity. A vision of education for the common good was lost to the individualistic emphasis of the me-first generation of the 1980s that continues to persist, unfortunately, to this day. As our education system declined, it's not a surprise that numerous less individualistic social democracies around the world would surpass us. They would surpass us in their educational outcomes. And it's also not surprising that those same better educated countries have surpassed us in other areas, in overall health, life expectancy, happiness, and quality of life. It's not a surprise that the social democracies that continue to hold a vision of education for the common good are less divided, less corrupt, and have much more vibrant and participatory democracies than we do. These better educated social democracies are also more effective at caring for the earth and being ecologically sustainable, and they are leading the way to protecting a livable climate for generations to come. While it may be true that we Americans have a hard time admitting when we are wrong, perhaps the time has come for us to recognize that our current individualistic and capitalistic approach to education is simply not working for us. It is making us worse as a nation by almost every measure. And it is one of the many factors that are literally tearing apart our social fabric and thus tearing us apart from each other. The path toward beloved community is long and it is difficult, But we will surely never get there unless we begin to recognize that education for the common good is good for us all. At this time, for the common good, we'll have a time of giving. You may bring your gifts to the table, and there's also opportunities to give online. Let's stand in body or spirit for a parting thought and the extinguishing of the chalice. Our parting thought comes from Malala Yousafzai from her book, I Am Malala. I truly believe the only way we can create global peace is through not only educating our minds, but our hearts and our souls. Let us join together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.